What happens when God's chosen people stop following God? Well, in my experience, and according to the book of Jonah, God chooses new followers. That's what we're talking about this week. Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching. Hello all. Welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live, but pre-recorded from my front room, aka Kindred Studio A. My name is Chris Hayden. I am the pastor of Kindred UMC.
My name is Ann, and I'm the treasurer of Kindred UMC.
Hey, my name is Andrew, and I have a tattoo of Ursa Major. That was the
all right.
That's
if you're wondering why we're all nodding, go watch last week's video. It's up there.
Man, it's been a whole week since I've seen you guys.
I know.
Wild.
Yeah.
Like
Crazy.
Hey, that's a sharp looking outfit, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. I wear this every Monday.
Right?
Yeah.
Or wait, what day does this release on?
Sundays.
Sunday, yeah.
It's got the date and the tag and everything,
Yeah.
you know?
And I still have the same flower on me.
It's just caked in now.
Yeah, I never washed the shirt. It's been a whole week and I didn't wash. I've been wearing this all week. I should be rewarded
How efficient.
for not getting any more flour on. We're doing a twofer. So we just recorded Jonah, but we're going to record another one now so that we can... we actually don't have to do it now because we're not going camping.
True, but we're doing it anyway.
Here we are. So we are continuing our journey through Jonah, one of my favorite books of the Bible. It's fun. It's satirical. Again, really do go watch last week because it kind of sets up the whole series. It's not a very big book, so the series will only be, I don't know. I haven't planned out the whole thing, but I'm imagining like 5 weeks or so. Excuse me. Sorry. Pardon me. So before we continue with our story, would you like to catch the audience up? What happened last week in the story of Jonah?
And do you want to take it or
This
should I?
This is a test.
I know, and we just
You
did this
will
like
be
5
judged.
minutes ago, and I had mom brain. I like...
That's all right.
Okay, hang on.
You got it?
I'll get it started at least.
Go for
we
it.
had God... Well, first off, it's a narrative, so...
Do you remember
there's
the first word important detail? How it
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what does it really mean?
The
Once upon a
significance of
time.
now?
That's right.
There we go.
Once
I
upon a
know
time.
that.
Yeah.
I got that part down.
Yeah, it's actually the word "now" in Hebrew is at least in this book it's a combination of Hebrew words that basically means and then it happened that. So it's the once upon a time of the Bible.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
So I'm trying to remember. No. God told him to go to Nineveh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
The word of the Lord.
The word of the Lord. I just couldn't remember if I know there's no specific prophecy thing, so I had to remember that. And then instead of going to Nineveh, he goes to not Nineveh in the opposite direction.
Yes.
And he gets in a boat.
Joppa is the name of the city.
That was the one. Yeah. And he gets in a boat. He goes down in the boat.
Yeah.
And then it's in the water and a storm starts. And all the sailors are praying and like, please help us. And Jonah is down in the boat sleeping.
Yes. He's a terrible, terrible prophet.
And then the captain gets mad at him and yells at him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing? Yeah. Yeah.
We're all here praying. Where are you?
Yeah. So
I'm with Jonah.
yes. So Jonah goes down and is asleep while the storm is threatening to literally break up the boat and kill all of them. So we're going to pick up Jonah chapter 1 verses 7 through oh no. Where did I turned the wrong page. Okay. Verses 7 through 16, I believe. Yes, 16. Verses 7 through 16 sound like this. The sailors said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots." Don't worry, I'll explain casting lots. "Come, let us cast lots so that we may know on whose account." This is a different version than the one I read, so the one I prepared has different wording. Come, let us cast lots so that we may know on whose account this calamity has come upon us. Which is isn't that just butter of the language? Like, we're going to cast lots so we know whose fault this is the point. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. Then they said to him, "Tell us why this calamity has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where are you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?" "I am a Hebrew," he replied. "I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were even more afraid and said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them so. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea was growing more and more tempestuous. Isn't that such a great word? Tempestuous. He said to them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it is because of me that this great storm has come upon you." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring the ship back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more stormy against them. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, O Lord, we pray, do not let us perish on account of this man's life. Do not make us guilty of innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." So they picked Jonah up and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord even more, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. So, first of all, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. Do you know what, whenever you hear or read in the Bible, the Lord, capital Lord, do you know what that is?
Is that just synonymous with Yahweh?
Yes. And what is Yahweh?
The Hebrew God. You know, Christianity God.
Yeah.
All the same.
Well, it's his name.
Yeah.
So when you hear the Lord, because in English, Lord is a title. Like nobody's named Lord except for the singer. Like she's awesome, but like she spells it with an E. So that's not God, we can tell.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not God. So the Lord, when you read it in the Bible, is the name of God. And it changes the way you think about it. When you hear, like, who do you worship? I worship Yahweh. And then they pray, Yahweh, please don't make us guilty for this. We're trying to do what you wanted. So please. And then at the end, they make vows to Yahweh. They sacrifice to Yahweh. So like the name changes slightly the way that it's kind of like perceived when you read the story. So know that that's throughout all the Bible. Know that when you read capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D, it's Yahweh. It's his name. It's a specific God. So that's one thing. Let's talk about tempestuous. So this is how the Bible lies to you. And anybody who is offended by that language, come at me, bro. Like I'm ready for it. I've been fighting this fight pretty much my entire career. The Bible lies to you. So it says the Lord cast a mighty storm upon the sea. It's a Hebrew word. It's SR basically, because it's different alphabet, but it's SR, and then they add vowels contextually. So it's like sur. Cast a mighty storm, sur. More and more tempestuous, same word. And then later it says they rowed against it, but it became more and more stormy against them, same word. And yet the English translators decided to use different English words for each of those, even though they are the same Hebrew word. And I hate it when they do that. Because again, as we discussed last week, this is a story. It's a bedtime story. And so it's very different to be like, it got stormy, it got tempestuous, and it was more and more stormy. And it's so much different to be like, if you've ever had kids or read bedtime stories, the repetition is part of the fun. And so what really is happening is the Lord hurled a great tempest upon the sea. And then the tempest became more and more tempestuous. And then even though they tried their best, it was more and more tempestuous against them. And like, it's supposed to be fun. And like, this is a story that is supposed to be fun. So, okay. So I just had to get that out of the way because it annoys me. So how does Jonah react to the storm?
he essentially just says, throw me in, which I find interesting because the whole story starts because he's like, this job sounds too hard. I'd rather avoid that. But then he's like, you might as well just kill me.
Right. Yeah.
Pretty much immediately.
He's like resigned himself to his fate.
Yeah, pretty nonchalant too. Like,
And from last week, what was he doing when the storm started?
Sleeping.
Yeah, he was literally asleep. So he just doesn't give an F about any of this, you know? So how would, this is a little bit of a leading question, but that's okay. How would you expect a prophet of Yahweh to act on behalf of the people?
You would expect him to be like a representative, I guess.
I was gonna say at first, well, yeah, I'd expect him to just be like, "Nah, throw me in." Like, that's God's trying to get me, so save yourselves, sacrifice me. But also, wouldn't he just say to God, like, "Hey, why don't you let me? Like, I'll fix it." Like,
so right. So a prophet's job. You're both kind of hitting on it. Normally, in every other prophet in the Bible, a prophet, God would say, I'm going to destroy these people, and the prophet would beg God not to. Like that's actually the established rhythm of a prophet. And the prophet would say, no, Lord, please spare your hand. Do not destroy them. Give them another chance. Please, God, don't do this. And do you remember what the actual request that the captain of the ship makes to Jonah when he finds him asleep? Do you remember what he actually asks him to do?
Yeah, he asks him to plead with his God. It's like we were talking about how they were kind of just like asking every God they could.
He asked him to pray, to plead with his God. And Jonah, it is interesting, does not utter a single word of prayer in this entire situation. He does not pray for the sailors. He's asleep. And he's like, whatever. Like, he has this whatever attitude. So again, I reiterate, this is a satire. Jonah is the worst prophet ever. Now, how does the story end? Like, what happens to the sailors?
They become Hebrew. Well, not Hebrew, but like they join that religion, essentially. They commit themselves to Yahweh.
Right. So again, this is an ironic turn. Jonah, despite fleeing from his calling and despite not lifting a finger to help these sailors, reluctantly gives testimony to God when they're like, who do you worship? And he's like, well, I worship the God who made all your gods. Like, that's essentially what he said. He's like, because in their worldview, there's like a mountain on the horizon, and like that's a god, and there's a god that owns that mountain or whatever, and so like and everyone's kind of born into their family of, we worship this god, and then they're like, who do you worship? Ask that god for help. And Jonah's like, well, I worship the God of heaven who made the land and the sea and made all of your gods, and is the biggest, baddest mother in the world. And they're like, what? Like, that's the God you pissed off? like, what are you doing here? What, like, do something, So despite his absolute refusal to even do anything to help them and reluctant testimony to Yahweh, the story still ends with them all converting. Like, he's the worst prophet in the world, and yet he's the most successful prophet in the world. Every other prophet gets arrested, beaten, tortured, like killed, and he's the one who's like, I worship the big bad God upstairs. And they're like, what? We're followers of that God now then, and it's, I hope you can hear the satire. It's supposed to be funny.
Right.
And then again, they throw him in the sea, and of course it does happen. I did say I was going to talk about casting lots. Casting lots, we don't know exactly what it is. It's basically dice rolling, or like drawing straws, or flipping coins, or something like that. And they just believed that in the randomness of that act, God was involved, and that's how they discover that Jonah's the one that God is after. And if you've ever played D&D, then it would be like, if you all roll and whoever gets the lowest roll, that's how you know that that's the one that God's looking to, throw into the sea. Jonah gets thrown into the sea. So once again, because this is the through line of Jonah. Once again, we see, if you won't follow my rules, I will make followers out of anyone. You do not have a monopoly on righteousness or goodness or following Yahweh. So, let me pause here and just say, okay, questions and observations, any?
It reminds me a lot of, it's almost like a trope where it's like comedies, especially, where you have like the reluctant person that really doesn't want to do it, but then they just keep accidentally doing things that turn out exactly the way that they're supposed to be doing it, and it just works out that way. And it also reminds me a lot of just like Bruce Almighty, where it's like, it feels like that same exact dynamic where it's like God's trying to get this guy power, and he's like, no, I don't want to do the good things, and then it just sort of like happens anyways, and hijinks ensue and all that.
It is, hijinks is a good word to describe the book of Jonah that often like goes over people's heads because it's like the Bible. We're reading the Bible,
Can't be fun.
Yeah, it's not.
There are no hijinks in the Bible.
Yeah, there are no hijinks. How dare you? Yes, so like hijinks is a great word. It is. People would have laughed at this book, and yet it still is saying something really profound about God. It reminds me a little bit of the Tower of Babel story. So Tower of Babel, God says, multiply and fill the earth. That's the narrative in Genesis. And then instead people gather and build walls. And then God says, okay, screw that, and like scatters everybody all across the world. It's like God's going to get God's way no matter what. Do you want to be a part of it or not? And Jonah's kind of the same. This is a little bit of a simple, like, God's going to get God's way. You're going to Nineveh, buddy, like whether you like it or not. Do you want to cooperate, or do you want to be, obstinate?
I was going to say, that's the only thing that kind of hit me as you were saying that, is the cooperation. Are you going to lean into it, or are you going to pull away from it? I am very stubborn as a human being, if you haven't caught on yet. So I often pull at the end of my leash. But there have been many times where I'm like, okay, I'll do it. Because like it drags you there eventually. And it would have been a lot more peaceful and easier for all parties involved if I just did it in the first place.
Yeah. And that's kind of the heart of the question, I think, this week is what is God asking you or us more broadly? What is God asking us to cooperate with that we, I like your pulling at the end of your leash. I think that's a really great image, that you are pulling at the end of your leash. Where is God calling us that we are desperately running from? And I know that's a deeper question, so I'm happy to go first, but how do you feel about that question? Because I did kind of spring it on you, I realized.
I definitely think it sounds like a good question. I don't have an answer on hand right now, but maybe I can think of one by the time you're done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for me, I'm a member. I have other clergy friends. Then we have like an accountability group, basically, and it's a WhatsApp group, and we just text each other, and we like get together anytime there's a churchy conferencey event. We all kind of like sit together and like check in with each other, and then we also like do retreat. We like go and get an Airbnb and check in with each other. It's good to have like these guys it's being a pastor is so freaking weird. It's so weird. It's really hard to describe why and how it's weird. But it is so weird because one of the questions that Taylor and Hannah asked was, when did you know you were going to be a pastor? I was like, I'm still not sure. It's so weird to be a pastor. So anyway, I'm in this group with these other guys because they also know what it's like to be a pastor, and they also know how weird it is. And one of the things that I've been kind of like trying to work through with them is I've been having a lot of frustration and resentment, which I need to work on with my denomination, with the church in general, about what I perceive to be our performative nature, rather than giving a crap about whether or not people are actually experiencing wholeness and freedom and the ability to articulate their life experience in a safe place, and their ability to work through, and again, some of this is, I'm coming off of the interview that I just did with Hannah and Taylor, and I'm struck because Hannah is a black lesbian. Taylor is a recently identified as non-binary. She describes herself as a non-binary lesbian. So complicated things, and who knows what minds are going to be changed and all that. And my God, shouldn't the church be a place where people who are dealing with the who am I questions, shouldn't the church be the community that's like, come here, come in. We're not and not in a judgmental, we're going to tell you what to do way, but in a all right, I am also I still am not sure I want to be a pastor. I am also working out my identity and calling. So I am frustrated with what I perceive to be in the church a proclivity for the performative, and a neglect of actually helping people, actually giving people space to connect with God, actually people defining who they think God's calling them to be. And if we disagree, who freaking cares? And I did not want to say freaking there. If we disagree, who cares? Fine, disagree. Okay, whatever. If you think being gay is sinful, great, don't be gay. If somebody else is fine with it, then shut up and let them be who they are. That I am really, really working with the, again, what I said, I have resentment. It's okay to have critique. It's okay to have criticism. It's really, resentment's basically just another word more palatable for hatred. That's just all it is. And so I'm actively working on my, we talked last week about who's your Nineveh, and where I think God's calling me to go, where I don't want to go. It's that. It's I need to get to the bottom of that. And it's going to take time, and it's going to take grace, and it's going to take God's intervention. So I'm going to allow God to work on that. But man, I get so angry about it.
Well, since you're working on that, you won't die anytime soon. That's been my lesson in life. If you've got a big thing to work on, God won't take you yet, because
this is just the latest big thing to work on. Lord knows I've got headroom,
Yeah, I've really noticed this in the last couple of years, and I got better at it, and then I think I got worse again. But everybody's got a weak spot, right? I struggle with, I don't like to say control, but it kind of is. I want to have it handled, or I want to know what's coming or what's going to happen or whatever. And I have a toddler. Okay. There's nothing guaranteed either. He had a lot of potential big problems when he was little, and that was tough. That was a real...
Poor kid had to wear a helmet for the first year of his life.
It was only 2-3 months, but he did have he couldn't look to the left. It was bad. It was scary. Yeah. And I think that's I had to let myself, and it was a hard balance too, because the fact that I was so proactive and so good about it is part of the reason that he's doing as well as he is today. But also, I can't force it. So it's that balance of I don't have to control everything, and I can't control everything, but also I don't want to just throw it all up in the air and be well, I don't care then, whatever. It's finding that.
Wouldn't it be so much easier if we people with eating problems? It's you can't not eat.
Right.
You have to eat. But if you have an unhealthy relationship with food, it's like, what? God, I wish I was an alcoholic instead. I could just not drink, you know, like, but yeah, it's the same thing. Like you have to maintain control for some things.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a mom, like you have to be on top of some things, and you also have to let some things go. And the middle ground is so much harder. It's so much more difficult.
And I think it's hard too, because there's a certain level of consistency you have to maintain too. Like, I can't let you have ice cream for dinner today because I had a bad day.
It's not an everyday treat.
Right. Like, I can't just throw it to the wind because I had a bad day. I have to be like, no, even though today's not fun and we're all going to not have fun together, you can't have whatever you want, you know?
Yeah. Did you come up with something?
Yeah.
It's okay to not, by the way.
No, I got something. It's not nearly as dramatic as, I feel like God's calling me to something. But I currently work as an engineer. But and so I guess to lead into that story, I took a, what do they call them? Placement test, something like that, like a test that you
like
take
assessment.
Assessment. So I took a test in like 7th grade, and it was supposed to tell you what occupation you were best suited for, and I got aerospace engineer, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, and I got really excited, and I like leaned into it and all that. And then like as like a couple of years went by, I don't know if it was just fatigue from me thinking about it too much or just being enamored by newer stuff, but I got really into the arts, and so I got in my head that I wanted to do that.
By the way, you should hear Andrew sing one last time at karaoke from Hamilton. It's pretty great.
I appreciate that.
It's so good I request it.
But yeah, so I got into chorus, I got into acting, and so I decided that I wanted to be an actor instead, even though I had spent years of my life preparing and thinking about how I was going to be an engineer. And so I went as far as to fly to New York and audition for the Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. And I got it at NYU. I did not get into the Tisch School of the Arts. And I had like done a thing where it's like, I can't remember exactly how it works, but it's some sort of like early enrollment thing. And if you sign up for it, basically like you have to commit to say like, hey, if you get in, you have to accept. You can't deny it if you're doing this early enrollment thing. But because I didn't get into Tisch, that didn't apply. So I still got to make the choice. And so at first I was like, well, I could go anyways and then just audition for the Tisch School. I'm going to have to take gen eds anyways. So I'll just audition again the next year. But then the more I thought about it and the more I like reflected, I was just like, this is something that I like to do, but it's not necessarily something that I'm great at. I think I'm good at a lot of it, but I don't think like I was never going to be an A-list actor or anything like that. And I got to the point where I realized I didn't really enjoy the minutia of it. It's like the being on stage and performing was awesome, but everything else around it and the dealing with the kind of personalities you deal with in that world, I realized how much it sucked. And I realized
Actors? What do you mean?
But I realized that I had been being dragged into the direction that I had originally set my sights on. And that made so much more sense to me. And I realized that I could still do the fun parts of it without it having to be a job and having to stake my livelihood on it. And so that's the route that I ended up going down, and I think it worked out pretty well for me. I did major in aerospace. I didn't end up working in aerospace, but I am an engineer, and I think that's been great.
You seem like an engineer too.
Yeah,
it works.
I do give off an engineer vibe. I feel like that's very clear.
I'll say it this way: when you did karaoke, I was more surprised about that. That like, oh, this boy can sing. Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I identify with that a lot, and for me, I had a great time being a worship leader, worship director. I'm not the best musician in the world, but I'm really good at building a band and like getting a band to work together and getting really talented musicians to like have fun together, along with volunteers and not so talented music, like people who are just coming to the table for the first time, kind of like I was good at that. And that was a fun thing. And I also I kind of reluctantly had to accept the calling to be a pastor, because it's like there's only so much you can do. I had to decide what was most important. Like, these things are great and they're fun and I enjoy them, but what is most important to me is the ability to affect people in this type of way. And yeah, so I can identify with that, kind of having two paths laid before you and needing to choose which one is the best fit. Yeah, so same question to anybody who's watching. Where is that tug? Where is that calling? What's the thing you're fighting against? What's the thing that God is doing in your life that you are resistant to? And I'm not asking you to like throw caution to the wind. What's a step you can take in that direction? What's one step today, this week, you can do to say like, all right, I'm going to maybe start cooperating and see how God shows up.
So you're saying that we shouldn't ask a bunch of sailors to throw us into the ocean?
Yeah, do not throw yourself in the ocean. This is I cannot emphasize this enough. This is not a literal story. There will be no fish to come swallow you, and if it does, it won't go well. I promise.
And it'll be terrifying.
It will be a really bad way to go out. I promise. So yeah, find the thing that you are resisting that God is trying to do, and take one step closer and see what your cooperation with God does. See how it goes. Just do a little experiment. And I've gone on way too long, as I often do. So may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Amen.
Them.
Them.